Hello, my name is Roman Miller. I'm one of the forecasters here at the National Weather Service in Wakefield, Virginia. And today is July 2nd, 2026, and we'll go ahead and look at our future weather conditions expected over the next several days and even looking ahead into the next week. So, the main concern right now is this prolonged and widespread heat wave that has already continued starting yesterday and will continue into the holiday weekend, potentially beyond. And this does have the potential to be the most significant heat wave in several years, with temperatures likely to reach 97 to 103 degrees, potentially locally higher in spots between today and Saturday across most areas, with heat indices, widespread heat indices of 105 to 110 or hotter likely. Given all of that heat, we do have several heat warnings and advisories in effect, and I will go ahead and go into that a little bit later. But before I do that, I will mention that our radar is out of service due to a mechanical issue, and the mechanical issue itself, unfortunately, does not look like it can be resolved very quickly. So our radar will be offline through at least the holiday weekend. So I just want everyone to be aware of that. And remember to look at the different radars nearby, such as Sterling, Dover, Moorhead, Raleigh, and Blacksburg, to keep an eye out if and when we do get convection later this week into this weekend. Now, looking ahead at our weather pattern, we do have a large ridge across the area which is presenting all of this heat for us. And that ridge does finally begin to break down later into the weekend, into early next week, when we do have an increased chance for some storms out there. And looking at the conditions right now, I'll go ahead and show that. The temperatures out there this morning are already into the lower 90s for some spots, with dew points in the mid 70s around Richmond and Central Virginia, and then even the Eastern Shore as well, with a little bit cooler temperatures, relatively speaking, of course, across far southeastern Virginia and northeastern North Carolina in the mid 80s. And looking now into tomorrow's severe setup, we do have a marginal risk for severe storms across northern portions of the area, essentially from Richmond north. However, we have drawn in here the greatest potential for storms does look like it's going to be from the I-95 corridor and west, based on several of the cams available or the convective allowing models. So some of those high resolution models do show convection even further south from the marginal, and given the moist and unstable air mass in place for us, we could see some strong to severe gusts in any storms that develop on Friday. So we'll keep that in mind, and it is possible that that marginal could get expanded to the south. But as of now, there's low confidence in storm coverage and intensity. We have moderate confidence in timing only because it does look like a afternoon, especially late afternoon into early evening time frame. So if storms do develop, they're probably going to happen within that time frame. It's just a matter of if they form whatsoever, and that's where the uncertainty lies. And the storm motions are going to be quite slow tomorrow as well. And before I talk about Saturday, actually, I do want to show some of that uncertainty. And one of the ways we can look at the uncertainty is by looking at what different models have for the same time of the day. So this one particular model has scattered convection developing again west along and west of 95 later in the afternoon on Friday. And then we'll go to the next one, and it's much less widespread and mainly just a few showers, maybe a storm across that far southwestern portion of our northeastern North Carolina counties, but not much at all. And then this model has convection mainly around and south of 64, whereas this one's looking north of 64. And then this one has no convection whatsoever. So that just gives a glance at the uncertainty that we're dealing with respect to convection on Friday. Again, we can't fully rule out anywhere or anything happening as far as convection if we get storms or don't in those regards. But right now we do have that marginal again for the northern portions. But again, I just don't want to throw out all of the Piedmont in case they do get storms. Now looking ahead into Saturday, as the ridge starts to kind of break down a little bit, we are under a slight risk for severe storms, and that looks like it's going to be from 3 p.m. through around 11 p.m. Storm motions will probably be quite slow again, around 15 to 20 miles an hour, and most of the model guidance that has convection does favor the convection forming kind of off the lee trough in the northwestern Piedmont and then moving to the southeast with time later in the day on Saturday. So we will have to closely monitor that with it being a holiday and having a lot of people outdoors. That is certainly something that's on all of our radars. So our confidence is going to be low to moderate confidence, and our intensity is moderate confidence and intensity of the storms. So if storms do develop, given the very hot and humid conditions, we do think that they'll have the potential to produce some strong wind gusts, potentially in excess of 60 miles per hour. And I can't rule out some isolated flooding as well, given the slow storm motions, but the main concern is going to be the damaging winds. We also have a severe risk for Sunday, another slight risk for severe storms across much of the area for a similar setup as Saturday, with perhaps a little bit more coverage. So the primary winds are going to be the primary hazard is going to be winds for for the weekend in general. And now focusing in on the heat headlines. Again, I mentioned that the temperatures are already up above 90 in some spots this morning. Well, we do have the extreme heat warnings in effect for essentially locations along and north of 460, with heat advisories to the south. The only locations of our forecast area not under any headlines at the time are the Maryland beaches as well as the eastern Currituck Outer Banks. Those are the only locations where it looks like it's going to be a little bit cooler heat indices, once again, relatively speaking, today, with heat indices likely remaining below 105. But for everyone in the extreme heat warning, it looks like you could see some heat indices above 110, with the advisory areas seeing 105 to 109. And then moving ahead into Friday, the heat kind of builds further to the southeast and overspreads the area in general, and it could be a little bit more humid as well. So because of that, we have a larger portion of the area under an extreme heat warning, and we have thrown in southeastern Virginia into that warning where confidence is higher and reaching heat indices above 110. And we do have an extreme heat watch further to the south as well as for the Virginia Eastern Shore, where we could see heat indices above 110, but confidence is not quite as high as locations already under the warning. And while we don't have any headlines currently in effect for Saturday, due to some uncertainties regarding convection, we will have to look into that later on and make a decision with respect to additional heat headlines. But some sort of heat headlines are likely on Saturday. It's just a matter of whether we go with advisories or warnings and for what locations. Now looking at our excessive heat threat over the next 5 days, you can see why we have those warnings out there. We are under significant threat across much of the area today, and even a little pocket of extreme. And then tomorrow, pretty much everywhere away from the immediate coastline is under a significant threat with a little bit larger area of that extreme risk. And similar situation for Saturday with most of the area under a significant threat. And even into Sunday, we could see some lingering heat concerns as we head into Sunday and perhaps even Monday, but uncertainty does increase after Saturday due to the potential for some convection. Now looking at our forecasted maximum temperatures and heat indices over the next 3 days. Today, we could see highs approaching or exceeding 100 across the northwestern portion of the area, and likely remaining in the 90s further to the southeast. But tomorrow, a large portion of area could see highs above 100 degrees, with some potential even reaching 102 or 103. And then Saturday, again, quite a widespread potential for maximum temperatures around 100, maybe a little bit hotter. And when you factor in the humidity to that, we get our heat indices of some locations getting to 110 or warmer today, with a much larger portion of the area, almost everyone, potentially seeing heat indices above 110 tomorrow. And then on Saturday, the chance is still there. You see we have 109s in spots. It's pretty close to 110. It's going to be close out there in general. It's just a matter of if we get storms developing before we get there. But that being said, it does look like that extreme heat does continue through at least the early part of the weekend. And again, even though we don't have any headlines out right now, we will have to look back at that later on and decide what to do with our headlines. Now, this graphic just shows a quick overview as to how hot it's going to be and for how long. So you can see that over the next 4 days at least, we are seeing heat indices above 100 degrees basically area wide. Again, if you're along the immediate coast, it might be a little bit lower at times, but in general, this is a long and quite significant heat wave with record highs potentially being broken across many locations over the next few days for those daily record highs. And I will mention that this could be the most widespread and longest duration, which is something that we don't see too often with these heat wave since July of 2012. Looking now at the wet bulb globe temperatures, you can see that for today, we have those values around 89 for most areas inland, and then 90 in the warning from Richmond Metro, north and east, and then those 90-degree wet bulb global temperatures spread almost everywhere for Thursday. And then by Friday, you still are dealing with an 89 to 90-degree wet bulb global temperatures, which, again, those values are a little bit different than when we're talking about heat indices or temperatures, but we do have a scale down that shows a little bit what that means. But essentially, if you're working or exercising in direct sunlight, it'll stress your body after only 15 minutes, and recommend that take at least 45-minute breaks every hour if working or exercising in direct sunlight. So whenever you get into that purple category of 90-degree or higher wet bulb global temperatures, that's when you're in a dangerous situation, certainly outside. And even in the red category, you're getting into a dangerous category there for doing any sort of outdoor work or exercise. So we want everyone to be aware of that potential as we head into the weekend. I will mention as well that this should say Friday and this should say Saturday. Now, looking at our shower and storm chances, Friday, again, they're not very high chances, but we could see a few pop-up storms across mainly the Piedmont or northern portions of the area. Confidence does increase by Saturday across the area with the greatest confidence across the northwestern portion of the area. And again, as we head southeast, confidence decreases, but certainly can't rule out storms really anywhere on Saturday. And then as we head into Sunday, our chance of rain does continue to increase with scattered storms possible. And then overall, over the next week or so, our total amount of rainfall is going to vary widely given the convective nature of the showers and storms, where some locations could see well over an inch if they get hit by multiple storms or a heavier thunderstorm with heavier rain, but other locations might see very little to no rain whatsoever over the next several days. And then just looking at a regional forecast overview over the next week, you can see that temperatures finally start to improve by next week as we get more convection across the area, with the shower and storm chances really occurring every day starting Saturday onward into at least the middle of next week as we get into a more active pattern. And then I will also mention the rip current risk is low over the next few days. And as I already alluded to, it's going to still remain above normal temperatures, but maybe not as hot as what we've been dealing with for the next week, looking at the 6 to 10 day outlook. But conditions are looking more favorable for precipitation, so we do have above normal precipitation favored for late next week and beyond. And then finally, the drought monitor. That new outlook came out today, and we have seen some improvement across portions of southeastern Virginia, the eastern shore, and northeastern North Carolina. However, everyone still is under some level of drought, with a large area under D2 and D3 drought, especially across some portions of our lower Maryland eastern shore, as well as the Piedmont. And no tropical activity is expected during the next 7 days. Now I will transition here over to the marine side of things. So let me show that here. But in general, it looks like pretty benign marine conditions are expected over the next several days, with just a few locations under a limited category of marine threat over the next 5 days. And in general, it looks like mainly southerly winds and subsmall craft conditions continuing into the weekend, and then even beyond potentially. And then I will skip ahead here to our overview into early next week with our sustained winds on the top and wind gusts on the bottom. And you see, in general, light southerly winds and gusts mainly below, at or below 20 knots over the next several days. So quiet marine conditions are expected because of those light winds, pretty low seas and waves as well, only around 1 to 2 foot waves and 2 to 3 foot seas expected over the next several days. And then, as I already mentioned, no tropical activity is expected over the next 7 days.